What's up, Bills Mafia? Ryan Thomas here for a special edition of the Thomas Take Sports podcast. I was not planning on putting out a podcast Wednesday night here. I was planning on taking a little bit of time off, to be quite honest with you, just in terms of the last few weeks, what we have worked up to and what we saw on last Sunday. I thought to myself, you know what, I'm going to do a post-game show. I'm going to give my thoughts on this stuff, and then I'm going to take a little bit of time to just kind of get my thoughts and kind of just grieve, frankly, from what we saw on Sunday between the Buffalo Bills and the Cincinnati Bengals. But, you know, obviously social media gets the thoughts flowing, gets my mind back right here on the podcast, talking to you guys, Bills Mafia, in regards to the Buffalo Bills, of course. In the bottom left corner of this podcast, you can see my social media, at Ryan Thomas Take on Twitter. Want to hammer home the fact that I am very active on Twitter. I post a lot of takes on Twitter, post a lot of interactive stuff. I really want to reach out to Bills Mafia, and I want Bills Mafia to be able to reach out to me and fire away any questions or fire away any of their own takes for me to read. I really enjoy that when I'm not on the podcast. So feel free to give me a follow on Twitter. I'd really appreciate it as well. I'll follow you right back. So no problem doing that on my end. If you can do that on your end, I really appreciate the support. As well, the Thomas Take Sports podcast is available on YouTube as well as Facebook streaming live, or after the fact, if you want to watch the episodes on demand, so to speak, you can definitely do that on Facebook or YouTube. And if you want to listen to the show, Soothing Sounds of Ryan Thomas, you can do that on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, anywhere you listen to your shows. You'll be able to hear me give my thoughts on those platforms. So I wanted to make that first and foremost. Of course, gotta let the fans, gotta let the viewers, gotta let the people know where they can find it as well. Being that this is streamed live, I do take comments. So comment on the Facebook live stream, comment on the YouTube live stream, and I will get to your comments throughout this episode. You'll hear me say, hey, such and such has a question, such and such says, fires away a comment that says, and I read it, and I respond to you live on cue. So feel free to do that. I really enjoy that aspect of this show, and that's why I do it live, so that I can actually interact with the Bills Mafia and hear their thoughts on all things but the beloved Buffalo Bills. So, that being said, this podcast is dedicated to the Buffalo Bills' top positions of need in the 2023 offseason. And I realize, as I put this list together, there are a lot of questions that will need to be answered in order for this list, and it's a top 5 list, mind you, in order for this list to really fall in line. But regardless, whether these decisions are made or not, really is up in the air as of right now. Obviously, we got a long way before we reach that point of NFL free agency, and then an even longer point away, obviously, from the NFL draft. NFL free agency comes first, and then the NFL draft, of course, my favorite month of the year, April. You got Easter Sunday, start of baseball season, as well, the NFL draft, last and certainly not least, April 30th, my birthday. So, hey, April's a good month for RT, all right? So, top positions of need in 2023 as far as the offseason and the positions of need that I hope that the Bills target. I'm going to start off with number 5, and I'm going to work my way up to number 1. And number 5 is a position that I think there's a reason I put this here, and I'm going to preface it by saying that. Preface this number 5 ranking with a statement. Running back is my number 5 position of need. Now, I do believe Devin Singletary wants to stay in Buffalo, but I have a feeling he is not going to, and there's a few reasons for that. Largely because of the fact that the Bills and their salary cap situation is not that great. Secondly, Devin Singletary had the highest active running back fumble rate in the National Football League. The only reason why he didn't finish with the only reason why I say active is that Melvin Gordon actually had a higher fumble rate but he was cut by the Denver Broncos due to the fact that he fumbled so much. Devin Singletary obviously fumbled just as much, if not more, than Melvin Gordon. In terms of active running backs, he was right at the top of the list in terms of his fumble rate, which can't happen in the National Football League, let alone at the rate that it was with Devin Singletary. I've always been a big defender of Devin Singletary. I don't think he's going to be back. If I were to, make the decision, it really comes down to dollars and it comes down to cents. If it doesn't make sense, then, he's not going to be back. And I say this in terms of the position currently and who they have. James Cook, I really felt like he started to turn it on and he started to show positive signs. He led the NFL for the last few weeks of the season at the very least in terms of yards per carry. I really liked what I saw from him. I really liked what the Bills did with him in terms of his usage. Outside of the fact that I only wished it happened a little bit sooner in the season, and I felt like in some weeks Devin Singletary's usage actually held James Cook back. Now, during the season this year, the Buffalo Bills traded Zach Moss for Nyheim Hines. And I've always been a fan of Nyheim Hines. I loved what he did with the Colts. I loved him as a player, how they used him. And I thought, great, this is how this guy is going to come right into Buffalo, and he's going to fit in really well. They need this type of pass-catching running back. And yet, they didn't really use him that way. He was used primarily as a returner, punt returner, kick returner. And I thought that was okay. Well, he was used as a returner in Indy, but not nearly as much as he is in Buffalo. When are we going to see this guy at running back? I think we're going to see him more at running back in 2023, but I put running back as the number 5 in this ranking due to not only the fact that I don't trust how they're going to use Hines or whether I don't fully know that, right? As well as the fact that I think you need a running back that can take a little bit of the pounding off of Josh Allen. And I don't know if James Cook is that guy, and I certainly don't think Nyheim Hines is that guy because he wasn't necessarily the guy that took the pounding away from Jonathan Taylor. Jonathan Taylor was still getting the highest carry rate in the NFL when Nyheim Hines was his backup. So I think that the Bills need a power running back. They need somebody that can barrel through the line that might not be opening up as many holes as it should be. And that has been a case, unfortunately, for this Bills offensive line, and I'll get to that a little bit later in the show. But I feel like a power running back would do a whole heck of a lot for a quarterback that has really taken a pounding in his own right the last few years. And Josh Allen's been in this league for 5-6 years, and I feel like he's taken a ton of damage over the course of that time with how he's been used. Most of it is self-provoked in terms of his ability to tuck the ball down and run and not slide when he needs to slide. But if he had a power running back, I would hope that that would be seen much, much less. And I think the way to do that is via mid-round draft pick. I don't expect Buffalo to be really big in terms of free agency this year. Maybe a couple moves here or there, but in terms of Brandon Beane's post-season presser, which took place yesterday, he didn't really seem too keen on the idea of spending a ton of the cap space that they essentially don't have. So that's my number 5 position. Number 4 is defensive tackle. Good buddy of mine, Harrison Phillips, who I've talked to during his years with the team, left and went to Minnesota. He got a 3-year deal for $19.5 million, and I thought that's going to hurt. That's going to hurt me just as a fan because I loved watching Harrison Phillips play for the Bills. I loved what he did for this community. He was very active within the community, and he was always a big proponent of Bills Mafia, whether it's guys that are podcasters like me. He loved the support that the Bills Mafia showed for the Bills just as average fans, podcasters, and just overall the community. He was a big fan of the community, and he is still, I should say, contributing to this community with Harrison's Playmakers, and it's a great foundation, and it does a lot of good within our community as well as within the Minnesota community. So Harrison Phillips moving on, going to Minnesota. We just heard a report that Jordan Phillips, the reacquired addition back to the team this past offseason, he left the Bills, went to Arizona, he came back to Buffalo this past offseason, heading into what was the 2023 season, of course. He was playing with a shoulder injury, collarbone, rotator cuff actually, that will require surgery. And I think that is a big deal in terms of what do we do, moving forward at that position. So not only did they lose Harrison Phillips, Jordan Phillips had a hard time staying healthy. Tim Settle really didn't do a whole lot, wasn't really seen much out on the field in certain weeks. He was barely out there. Apparently he had his own injury issues as well. So I think overall the depth of the defensive tackle position outside of Ed Oliver is pretty suspect. You don't know who you can really rely on. Daquan Jones was brought in. I think that's a player that's due for potentially being a contract restructure. As Brandon Beane talked about, some of the guys, in the running for being reconstructed as far as their contracts. So number 4, I have defensive tackle as the next position that I see the Buffalo Bills potentially making an addition via the draft or via free agency, depending on the veteran status. You could see a vet addition here that I think would be a low-risk, high-reward move for that position. Number 3 is safety, and this could easily be number 1, but this is the number 1 addition for the defensive side of the football. And it's due in large part to the fact that I do believe Jordan Poyer played his last down as a Buffalo Bill on Sunday against the Cincinnati Bengals. Unfortunately, a lot of people have debated over this on Twitter, and I think the debate has gotten to a point where, from what I've seen scrolling through the Twitter feed and the Twitter sphere, the debate has become a little bit toxic between fans as far as whether they should or whether they shouldn't keep Jordan Poyer. Now, Jordan Poyer is a great guy. He's done a lot for this team. He joined the team in 2017, Sean McDermott's first season. Micah Hyde joined Jordan Poyer. They both joined the team at the same time, manning this secondary, the back end of it, of course, at free and strong safety. And without these two guys, I don't think the team gets to where it is gone. I could easily say that. Without these two guys, they were huge as far as revitalizing this team and bringing it a new energy, and the fact that, I strongly believe Jordan Poyer won't see the day that the Bills win a Super Bowl as far as being a player on the team is truly sad. This guy gave a lot to the team. He played hurt this year from week 4 on. This was just an injury-riddled season for him, and he wants to be paid for what he's contributed to the Bills, and I don't think the Bills are going to be the team to do it based on, you got Allen at a high cap number, you got Diggs at a high cap number, you got Von Miller at a high cap number, Trey White at a high cap number, as well as Deion Dawkins at a high cap number. So I think Jordan Poyer is somewhat the odd man out, despite the fact that he's done the majority of the grunt work, so to speak, over the course of the last few years. I just don't see it. I don't see him coming back. And if he doesn't, if I'm right and he doesn't come back, the number 1 needed position on their defense is safety. And we need a safety that can, not only cover man, can cover zone, and can blitz like Jordan Poyer. And I think that'll be a big deal heading into this NFL draft. I could easily see that being the 2nd round selection, potentially the 1st, potentially the 3rd. Any one of those rounds, I could see them adding a safety that was a key contributor on their collegiate team that they played for in college, of course. So Jordan Poyer, I think he's going to be a departure, and that could lead to Buffalo obviously needing a safety as well. I think the team needs safeties anyway, even if Jordan Poyer were to stay on the roster somehow. Depth behind Jordan Poyer and Micah Hyde is not quite there. Obviously, with the situation with Damar Hamlin, I don't want to speak in terms of Damar Hamlin's playing future. I almost feel like it's disrespectful. So I'm going to avoid doing that, but I think we can put 2 and 2 together that Damar Hamlin has been through a lot. He's had a long recovery, as reported by the family spokesperson for the Hamlin family, and I don't know when he'll play again or if he'll play again. And if that's the case, as an NFL team, you have to make business decisions that put you ahead of the game. Do we have to replace Damar Hamlin? Is Hamlin coming back? We got to make that decision. We got to figure out who was going to take that backup spot potentially. And we did hear during the end of season press conference from Sean McDermott that the Bills are considering moving Christian Benford, the corner from Vanderbilt, that they drafted, or was it Vanderbilt or Villanova? I think it was Villanova, now that I think of it. But corner, 6th-round corner that, really burst onto the scene for the team early in the season. Most notably, he was a starting corner, and Kaiir Elam was inactive, who was their first-round pick. I talked about that in the post-game show, recapping where the Bills have gone wrong some weeks. I thought Elam should have been out there every single week, no matter what. And how Sean McDermott's culture over results approach, I think, has worked to his detriment. So hopefully that stuff is remedied a little bit, and we actually see Kaiir Elam out there every single week, and we see Christian Benford potentially out there at safety. That would kind of slide Benford over, and they might have to, go corner, in free agency to replace, obviously, Benford from moving to corner, to safety. So that's a reason why I have safety at number 3. Number 2 is the offensive line. Now, this one is extremely important, okay? And this goes to watching the games over again after already watching them. Because when you watch them one time, you watch them live, you're really just watching Josh Allen and seeing if he can sling it to Stephon Diggs. You're really just watching Josh Allen, seeing if he's going to tuck it down and do something really fun. Typically, when you're watching football, you're just seeing where the ball goes. And if the ball goes out of the quarterback's hands, from the right hand or the left hand out into his release point, you're expecting that to be within, 2.5 seconds, 2.5, not even, at least, or at most, I should say, 2 seconds. But when you go back with your clicker, like I do, and you look at this Buffalo Bills offensive line this season, it was one of the worst lines I've ever seen. I really, truly believe that despite the additions of Roger Saffold, David Quisenberry, and some of these additions that they made, their line was actually in some ways worse. And I say that because, listen, Josh Allen looked in certain weeks like he knew he had to will the offense to victory. Like, okay, if I make a mistake, I got to do double great the next time I'm out. But if my line's not protecting for me, then I really got to bust my hump to make sure that something happens. And oftentimes, when he tried to do that, he didn't get the protection that he needs to succeed in this league. And, I'm a big fan of the culture-driven Buffalo Bills in a lot of respects. But when I look at Dion Dawkins, did he go from good to great this year? No. When I look at Roger Saffold, was he an addition that was consistently good? He was not. He was okay, or he wasn't okay. Was he good? Some weeks he was good. It was like for every 3 weeks he was good, there'd be 1 week where he wasn't, then there'd be 2 weeks where he was a little bit better, and then he was good. It was just inconsistent. Mitch Morse, I think he's going to retire. I think he should retire based on the amount of concussions that he has had, and he really has nothing to prove. He's been phenomenal for this team. It's a big loss if, in fact, Mitch Morse does go. So that goes kind of hand in hand, the offensive line as a unit, as well as the defensive line. Controlling the line of scrimmage is a key to this game, is a key to success in this game. I think any football fan with any brainstem would understand that watching the game, despite the high-flying action that we want to see. But the offensive line is crucial to the success of a team, whether it's the passing game or the run game. And if Dion Dawkins, I don't think he's going anywhere. I'm not saying that. Left guard Roger Saffold, he's on the last year of his contract, 1-year deal. Is he coming back? We don't know. Mitch Morse, I don't think he's coming back. So that's just the left side, middle, center position. And then the right side of the line is really where I found their struggles to be seen. Spencer Brown, I hate to say it, but he took a step back this year. The David Quisenberry didn't take the reins from Spencer Brown early on. Spencer Brown worked and earned that job. He was the rightful number one tackle because Quisenberry didn't take the job from him. But when Brown was given that role as the number one tackle, he didn't perform well. And they would mix in Brown and rarely Quisenberry, and Quisenberry didn't take back the job. So you had a case where Brown earned the job and Quisenberry didn't supplant Brown for the job. Then Brown didn't do so well, and Quisenberry didn't take the job back. That's not a good situation. At right guard, you had Ryan Bates, who everybody was clamoring for to start last year, and he finally started. He looked great, and then this season he took a step back as well, I think. So the offensive line needs bodies, needs depth, needs legitimate young anchors to help Josh Allen get time to either run or preferably throw. And I say preferably not in the sense that I don't enjoy watching Josh Allen and his athleticism, but for the intents and purposes that Josh Allen actually has a long, prosperous career as the Buffalo Bills quarterback. That's what I want, because that's what gives the Bills the best chance at winning a Super Bowl. So the offensive line is an area of need. And without a shadow of a doubt, as I recap the top positions of need thus far, number 5, I have running back. Number 4, I have defensive tackle. Number 3, I have safety. Number 2, I have the offensive line. Easily middle linebacker could be thrown in this list because Tremaine Edmonds is debatable as to whether he's coming back. That's a big question, right? But I do think if he doesn't come back, the Bills will make that position a top priority in the draft, because there's a few guys out there that can definitely fit that role in this year's draft. And I'll talk about that as we inch closer to April, right? But number 1, more than anything, as glaring a hole on this team as any position is the wide receiver position. The wide receiver position of the Buffalo Bills. You have one of the best wide receivers in the league. One of the guys that I even debated with Justin Swank of 24/7 Buffalo Fandemonium last week after the Bills squeaked by the Dolphins. I hate to say that, but it's true. That Stephon Diggs is one of the best receivers that I've ever seen. Stephon Diggs might be, in terms of just all around, might be the best receiver the Bills have had since Andre Reed. I don't think that's a bold statement. I really don't. I'm a big Eric Moulds guy, one of my favorite players growing up, but I feel like Stephon Diggs is one of the best wideouts the Bills have ever had. Number 2 to Andre, in my opinion. And we didn't even draft him. We traded for him. There is a key fact to how this roster was constructed that I think is glaring as to why the roster is where it is today. You go back and look at the Buffalo Bills drafts in years past, you'd see that the last time the Buffalo Bills drafted a wide receiver in the 4th round or higher than the last time the Bills drafted a wide receiver higher than the 4th round, rather, was in 2017 when the team took Zay Jones, who has not been on the team for the past 2-3 years, who was drafted before Josh Allen was drafted, which means that in the Josh Allen era, the Buffalo Bills have not drafted a wide receiver in the 1st, 2nd, or 3rd round. It has to change in 2023 in order for the Bills to have a successful season and a successful future. Moving forward, beyond 2023, the Bills need another wideout, maybe even 2 wideouts. And for the years where the Bills took 2 defensive ends in the 1st and 2nd round, which wasn't that long ago, Rousseau and Basham, a couple years back, 2020. Who's to say that they shouldn't take 2 wide receivers in the first 2 rounds? Who's to say that they, at the very least, shouldn't take 2 wide receivers with their first 3 picks? No one should disagree with that. It's not a irrational thought, right? You have to surround your best player with weapons. Joe Burrow, he gets T. Higgins and Jamar Chase. Pat Mahomes, Kansas City couldn't pay Tyreek Hill anymore. They sent him packing. They got some picks. They used those picks to build around Mahomes, get him some offensive linemen, get him a running back late in the draft as well, freeing up their cap, avoiding paying Tyreek Hill the big money that the Dolphins gave him, to go out and sign some key free agents like Marquez Valdez-Scantling and Juju Smith-Schuster. So I look at that and I say to myself, there's a model of how to build around your quarterback that we're seeing, and it's been working in the NFL. And those two teams are the teams that are on Buffalo's hit list next year that they need to beat. KC and Cincinnati to get to where they need to go. As well, as I mentioned, the AFC is getting even better. Jacksonville has the before mentioned Zay Jones, now Calvin Ridley, and Christian Kirk. I'd take any one of those guys to pair with Stephon Diggs right now, as well as Gabe Davis. But instead, we have Stephon Diggs, we have Gabe Davis, and you have two receivers that Josh Allen had to go to the top floor of the organization. I say that facetiously, but literally go into the office of Brandon Beane and say, get me John Brown back. Get me Cole Beasley back. It's sad that the Bills had to resort to going back to the future in order to get better on offense. That the Isaiah McKenzie experiment was not a worthy one. That wasn't a question that we had an answer to prior to the season, but we certainly had the answer to it once the season was over. I'm not trying to be disrespectful to any athlete. I respect any athlete that steps out on the field. I'm just talking about results. Isaiah McKenzie was not what the Bills thought he could be. He just wasn't. Some players fit a role, some players don't, and he didn't fit that role of being a slot receiver. Doesn't mean he doesn't belong on the team, just the role that they thought he was meant for, he was not meant for. The role that they thought Gabe Davis was meant for, he was not meant for. I think the greatest thing to happen to Gabe Davis in his NFL career, the greatest day that he ever had, could actually be his biggest detriment. The 4-touchdown game against the Kansas City Chiefs made the Bills think that maybe this guy could be the number 2 receiver, and it put him in a role that he is just not ready for. I think he's a great player potentially. I think he's a good player right now, as a matter of fact. But in that role, I don't think he is the guy that should be in that role. And you can ask me, how do you see the Bills making these additions? What guys do you think they should go out and get? You can go and look at mock drafts all night long and see the wide receiver list just top to bottom and say that any one of those guys would be a welcomed addition to the Buffalo Bills given the current state of the Bills as well as their wide receiver position, okay? But free agency, Adam Thielen is somebody that I like. Free agency, you have a guy by the name of Odell Beckham Jr., and whether this guy wants big money or not, if you're his agent, you want to get him on a team. I don't know what team would be like his preferred number 1 destination, but I'd like to think that the Buffalo Bills would be in that top 3 running for a player like that as they were during this season. Not much has changed. You still have Allen. You still have Diggs. You still have a great culture surrounding the team. You still have one of your best buddies, Von Miller, on the roster. So I'd like to think that the Bills are still on the short list for OBJ no matter what. I like the idea of that. I'm more than willing to kick the tires on anybody that I feel has the talent to help us win a Super Bowl, and he has that. So the wide receiver position is the number 1 position for me of need for the Buffalo Bills. It's been ignored for far too long, even knowing and thinking that, okay, Gabe Davis is where we need him to be. We think he can be a really great player for us. They still should have added to this position, and they did not. Most importantly, one of the worst roster decisions as we whittled this roster down to 53 was to put a player by the name of Isaiah Hodgins on the practice squad. I was there when Gabe Davis and Isaiah Hodgins were drafted. I mean there meaning Rochester. And I watched Hodgins in training camp, and at that time, yes, I said it, go back all those years ago, wasn't too long ago that I said that Isaiah Hodgins I thought was better than Gabe Davis during training camp. And he had some injuries. He bounced back in the preseason. Case Keenum was throwing him the ball a ton when Isaiah Hodgins was working with the 2s, as well as Keenum, of course, being the number 2 quarterback. And they put him on the practice squad, and then he gets scooped by the Giants, and he's successful. The whole rest of the year, successful. One of the best receivers. So that's a tough pill to swallow because you drafted a guy, you developed him, you let him go onto your practice squad knowing that any one of the 31 teams could put in a claim for him and acquire him, and Brian Dable swoops in, former OC of the Bills, and takes him away from you. Good move for the Giants. Joe Shane, I should say, former protege of Brandon Beane, who probably played a big part in drafting Isaiah Hodgins, I'd like to think, was the reason that move was made. And I'm sure Dable signed off on it for obvious reasons. So that's a move that you gotta combat that by bringing somebody in, bringing in some talent, and hopefully they're able to do that. Okay. So Nabil Elfool says, let's get Josh Downs from UNC or Jordan Addison. Those are two names that I really like, and I think Addison could potentially be gone by the time the Bills pick. Both could be gone, frankly. I wouldn't be shocked at that in this past Happy League. Keith Casey Alice says, Josh Jacobs or Hunt in free agency. I don't know about the whole Josh Jacobs signing. I feel like Josh Jacobs is going to get a big payday from somebody, whether it's the Raiders or not. I don't know if Buffalo is in the running to make that payday, but I hope potentially that could happen. I want to go to my Facebook page. I know that on my Facebook page, a lot of people comment on my videos, and sometimes I don't see the comments because I'm live on StreamYard. So Sean Reeves says free agent tight end loaded would be very smart to get a dual set tight end. Will also help with strength of the line. Sean Reeves says Paris Campbell, sleeper at low cost. And that is all I'm seeing so far. But I know that there's more comments on here. Shane Courtney provided one. We'll see if I can open this up without messing up the audio on here. Shane Courtney says, I truly believe that 2 of the first 3 picks will definitely be on the offensive side of the ball. Depending on who is available, wide receiver and O-line are definitely top priority. I agree, safety is the top priority for the defensive side of the ball. And, I'm going to propose a theory as well that I think potentially the Bills could franchise tag a player. And that player could be Tremaine Edmonds. I think it's a possibility that they will discuss and go over. And it was a question that was asked to Beane, and I did just see it. So this was something that I thought prior to watching Brandon Beane talk to the media, and then a reporter asked the question. And I think it's a very worthy one because Tremaine Edmonds was seen as a big part of this defense this year. He did improve, but I do believe that there's plenty of work to be done, which goes towards my next point that, I think there's plenty of work to be done for Edmonds, but I can't truly evaluate him the way that I want to based on not knowing what the future is of this defense. And what I mean by that is not player-wise, but who's coaching it? Who's coaching this defense in 2023? Is it going to be Leslie Frazier, or is it going to be somebody else? And if it's somebody else, how does his changes change the role of a player like Tremaine Edmonds? 4-2-5 defense right now. 4 down linemen, 2 linebackers, 5 DBs. They could run, in particular, that 5 DB set because they had Jordan Poyer and Micah Hyde. I think Christian Benford is an interesting idea to move to safety. I don't know if it's going to be a successful one, but based on their cap situation, they might feel that obviously moving him saves them some coin from going out and acquiring a safety in free agency. But I think that this team is meant to run a traditional 4-3 defense. I think that Teron Johnson's role within that 4-3 defense wouldn't be diminished in comparison to the 4-2-5. I know that he's essentially seen as a nickel 5th DB, so to speak, nickel corner, where he's essentially lining up as an outside corner to the linebacker. And I think that his role, though, would still be as a nickel corner in a 4-3 defense, which you do need. So it doesn't diminish his role within the team. You need to figure out why the picks of Rousseau, Basham, and Epinesa have not worked out to their full potential yet. I think Rousseau has shown some really great things. Basham, I haven't seen it yet. And Epinesa, I haven't seen any of it yet, quite frankly. So, we've seen a little bit from Basham, not much, but I haven't really seen much of anything from AJ Epinesa, who was essentially their first-round pick. He was a second-round pick, but that draft they traded their first away to acquire Diggs. So we got some moves to make this offseason. It's going to be very interesting to see how it all shakes out, but I do believe this offseason is crucial towards whether or not they can run it back and go back to the AFC title game and or win that game and get to the Super Bowl and win the Super Bowl. There's a lot of levels for this team to climb in a ever-changing NFL and an ever-competitive, ultra-competitive AFC that is only going to get better. So there you have it. This is my Buffalo Bills' top positions of need in the 2023 offseason. I really appreciate you guys tuning in. It's going to be a very interesting offseason. And I know the take on Leslie Frazier, like I say, I'd like to see Leslie Frazier gone. Leslie Frazier's the one that's calling the plays defensively. Don't forget that at one point Sean McDermott took away the play calling opportunity for Leslie Frazier in game. And we saw the Bills defense be a much more aggressive one. Rather than a zone coverage, they were man coverage, and they were bringing it. And I just don't think Leslie Frazier's the right guy anymore. I think his defense could only be good with these players for so long. Can't be great. And it needs to be great in order for the Bills to get to where they need to be. So there you have it. Thanks for tuning into the Thomas Take Sports Podcast. I'm Ryan Thomas. We got all off-season long to discuss the Buffalo Bills. The season's not even over yet. Of course, we got the NFC and AFC championship games. I'll be sure to hop on here and give you guys my picks for those games. I do believe that there is a ton to discuss with those games. I'm not really amped up for them for obvious reasons, but I do want to give my picks for those games, and I look forward to doing that. So thanks for tuning in. Go Bills.